Social media disrupts wildlife. Viral selfie craze forces Highland cows into hiding. A peaceful nature reserve in England has been thrown into chaos after a surge of social media driven visitors began flocking to see its now famous Highland cows, ultimately forcing conservationists to remove the animals for their own safety. Now it's time to dig in detail and uncover the full story in today's AI podcast.
Ever been like scrolling through your phone late at night, the room is dark, and the algorithm just serves you this video of a gorgeous, seemingly hidden natural spot?
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Right. Maybe there's mist rolling over a hill, or this incredibly adorable, fluffy animal looking straight into the camera, and you get that instant, overwhelming urge to just go there.
You look at your screen and you just think, I have to see this for myself. I need to be in that space.
Exactly. It's such a relatable feeling.
Well, I mean, it's a profound and completely human impulse, really. We are neurologically wired to seek out beauty and novelty, to find connection with the natural world.
Which makes total sense.
Right. So when you see something captivating on a screen, your brain immediately tries to figure out how to close the distance between you and that raw experience. The digital image basically creates this hunger for a physical reality.
And today, we are actually exploring what happens to that physical reality when hundreds of thousands of people experience that exact same hunger at the exact same time for the exact same GPS coordinates.
It gets messy.
Oh, it gets so messy. We are taking a deep dive into the bizarre, chaotic, and honestly physically destructive intersection of social media algorithms and wildlife conservation.
Yeah, and we have a really fascinating case study for this.
We do. We're pulling from a report surrounding a recent incident in the English countryside, specifically involving a herd of very famous, very photogenic Highland cows.
Which is just the perfect example for this deep dive because, this isn't simply a local news story about overflowing parking lots or, annoyed park rangers.
Right, it's much bigger than that.
It really is. It's a real-time observation of how our digital behavior, specifically the way we consume and replicate short-form video, is literally altering the biological functions of wild animals. It's rewriting the physical landscape.
Yeah, and to understand the sheer scale of the disruption, we kind of have to look at the anatomy of a modern viral stampede.
We do.
So, okay, let's unpack this. We were focusing on reports out of the Hothfield Heathlands Nature Reserve, which is managed by the Kent Wildlife Trust in England.
A beautiful area.
Really beautiful. And before the internet turned its eye toward this specific location, it was essentially a quiet, delicate ecological haven. You have boggy soils, specific types of tough grasses, and roaming across this landscape are these rustic, shaggy-coated Highland cattle.
Just doing their thing.
Exactly. For years, they were just out there, quietly grazing, existing entirely outside of the human attention economy.
And outside the attention economy is the crucial phrase there.
Yeah.
Because the shift from a tranquil, balanced reserve to a chaotic, viral hotspot, it doesn't happen gradually anymore.
No, it's instantaneous.
Right. Because of the way algorithms push content based on watch time and engagement, a location can go from seeing maybe 20 local dog walkers a day to facing an influx of thousands of tourists almost overnight.
Which is exactly what happened here. Within weeks of the first few videos gaining traction, massive crowds just descended on Hothfield Heathlands.
And they weren't there for the fresh air.
No, the sources make it very clear these visitors weren't arriving to take a quiet nature walk or to go bird watching. They were arriving with a very specific mission, which was to capture the viral selfie with the Highland cows.
Yeah.
I mean, let's think about this. It's like a quiet, local library suddenly getting endorsed by a massive influencer. But instead of books, visitors are swarming 1,000-pound animals.
That's a great analogy, actually.
The sheer volume of cars immediately broke the infrastructure. The trendy country car parks overflowed, vehicles were abandoned on delicate grassy verges, and the pathways just became congested highways.
What's fascinating here is the psychological shift that occurs in the visitor when a physical location becomes a viral set piece.
How so?
Well, the people arriving at this reserve were no longer experiencing nature in a traditional sense. The mindset shifts entirely to content extraction.
Content extraction, wow.
Yeah, the reserve stops being a living ecosystem and basically just becomes a backdrop.
And the animals stop being living creatures and become props for a personal brand.
Exactly.
And to give you an idea of how intense this gets, the Kent Wildlife Trust had very clear rules in place. They issued repeated, desperate warnings asking people to maintain a minimum 10-meter distance from the cows.
Which is, what, about 30 feet?
About 33 feet, yeah. If you picture a standard school bus, that's roughly the distance you should be keeping.
Right.
It's a standard common sense buffer for wildlife.
It really is the bare minimum distance required to ensure an animal doesn't feel actively hunted.
Hunted. And yet, the visitors completely ignored it. The reports detail endless streams of videos showing people walking directly up to the cattle.
It's just wild to me.
It's crazy. We are talking about visitors attempting to pet them, hugging their necks, and deliberately standing right in the center of the herd as the animals are trying to graze.
All for a video.
All to ensure they get the perfect framing for their front-facing cameras.
Which brings us to the aesthetic deception of the Highland cow.
The aesthetic deception, I like that.
Because you look at them and they are undeniably striking, right? They have that thick orange shaggy coat and that iconic swoop of hair covering their eyes.
They look like giant mythical teddy bears.
They really do. And that specific visual appeal is exactly what makes them perform so incredibly well on a screen. But that aesthetic completely betrays their biological reality.
Right.
These are not domesticated petting zoo ponies. They are incredibly hardy, semi-wild animals adapted to survive in harsh environments. They are rarely handled by humans.
Okay, now, I need to stop and push back on something in the source material here. Because when I first read this, it honestly sounded like a massive exaggeration.
Oh, about the physical impact.
Yeah. The Wildlife Trust specifically notes that this sudden influx of humans wanting a quick photo was leading to actual weight loss and physical deterioration in the cows. Wait. How does simply having people stand near them or even gently pet them lead to actual weight loss? I mean, I get that it's annoying for the animal, sure, but starving a 1,000-pound cow just by taking its picture?
I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive because we are conditioned to think of harm strictly as direct physical violence, like a strike or a wound.
Right.
But we have to examine the biological stress response of a semi-wild herbivore. Their entire evolutionary survival strategy is predicated on constant situational awareness.
Because they're prey animals.
Exactly. They are prey animals. When dozens of unfamiliar humans suddenly surround them, talking loudly, pointing reflective glass objects at them, reaching out to touch them, the cow's central nervous system does not register a fan club.
Oh, wow.
It registers a coordinated pack of predators.
So their bodies immediately dump cortisol and adrenaline into their bloodstream. The fight-or-flight mechanism just takes over.
Precisely. Now imagine you are trying to eat a sandwich, but a fire alarm is blaring in your kitchen, strobe lights are flashing, and 20 strangers are pressing their faces against your window.
I am definitely dropping the sandwich.
Right. You aren't going to take a bite. Your body shuts down the digestive process to prepare your muscles to either run for your life or fight for it.
That paints such a clear picture.
And the sources note the animals were visibly distressed. They were aggressively shaking their horns and displaying hypervigilant behavior.
So they're burning a massive amount of caloric energy just maintaining that defensive posture.
Yes.
Their heart rate is elevated, their muscles are tense, they are locked in this state of high alert.
And while they're burning all of that emergency energy, they're completely abandoning their core biological function.
Eating.
Grazing isn't a hobby for a Highland cow. It is a near constant necessity. Their complex, multi-chambered stomachs require them to take in massive amounts of rough forage continuously.
Which they can't do if they're terrified.
Exactly. And critically, they need to be in a relaxed state to actually chew their cud and digest it. When human interaction continuously disrupts this, they literally cannot take in the calories required to survive.
That's terrifying.
So yes, the mathematics of stress mean that standing 10 feet away and taking a selfie, multiplied by 1,000 tourists a day, literally starves the animal from the inside out.
That is a staggering way to frame it. The mere presence of our digital obsession acts as an invisible barrier to their basic biological survival.
Yeah.
They are so consumed by the perceived threat of our cameras that their digestive systems just stall.
And the thing is, when an entire herd of massive herbivores stops acting naturally, it doesn't just damage the animals.
Right.
It acts as a wrecking ball to the entire physical environment they live in.
So what does this all mean for the reserve? It means the situation in Kent reached a breaking point.
A total crisis.
The biological pressure on the animals became so severe that the Wildlife Trust had to execute a drastic intervention. They were basically forced to round up the entire herd, remove them from Hoffield heathlands entirely, and relocate them to an undisclosed secret location.
Which is wild.
They essentially had to hide these massive cows from the internet just to keep them alive.
And you have to understand, removing a keystone species from a nature reserve is an absolute last resort for any conservation group.
Right.
Is an admission of defeat.
Because these cows aren't just there to look pretty for the locals. The source material uses a very specific, fascinating term for these animals. They call them ecosystem engineers.
Yes, I love that term.
I'll make sure we really understand how this works mechanically. They aren't just wandering around eating grass. They are actively employed as a living, breathing multi-tool for the park rangers.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. An ecosystem engineer is an organism that literally modifies, maintains, or creates a habitat.
Okay.
Let's look at the mechanics of how a Highland cow grazes compared to, say, a lawnmower or even a sheep.
Sure.
A sheep or a horse will neatly clip the top of the grass, leaving a uniform surface. But a Highland cow wraps its massive, rough tongue around clumps of tough, invasive grasses and violently rips them up by the root.
Which honestly sounds destructive, but it's actually by design.
It's exactly the opposite of destructive. It's vital. By ripping up the tough vegetation, they leave behind these uneven, churned-up patches of bare soil.
And why is that important?
Because those tiny, disturbed patches are the exact microhabitats required for rare, ground-nesting bees and specialized insects to lay their eggs.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Furthermore, these cows are heavy. As their hooves press into the boggy heathland, they create thousands of tiny, temporary pools of water in the mud.
Which I'm guessing are useful.
Very. They become breeding grounds for amphibians and rare flies. Plus, they also carry seeds in their shaggy coats and in their dung, dispersing native flora across the reserve.
So without them actively ripping up the grass and stomping through the mud, the delicate machinery of the heathland simply grinds to a halt.
Completely.
The invasive plants take over, the rare bees have nowhere to nest, and the ecosystem collapses. They are the maintenance crew.
Yep.
And because the paparazzi wouldn't leave them alone, they were functionally fired from their jobs.
Fired from their jobs, exactly. But the absence of the cows is really only half of the environmental catastrophe detailed in the reports.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. While the tourists were crowding the cows, they were also inflicting massive structural damage to the reserve itself.
Well, sure, because thousands of people desperate for a photo don't exactly neatly line up single file on a designated gravel path.
No, they disperse. When you have unprecedented foot traffic from urban visitors, many of whom, by the way, are not wearing appropriate footwear for a boggy heathland.
Oh, I can imagine. White sneakers in the mud.
Right. So they instinctively avoid the muddy trails, they step off the path onto the fragile edges, and over weeks, the pathways widen, leading out into the reserve.
Trampling everything.
Those thousands of heavy footsteps crush and compact the soil, suffocating the rare mosses, destroying the insect habitats, and obliterating the very nature they drove hours to see.
Which raises such an important question about the paradox of the modern nature enthusiast.
It really did.
You have people spending money on gas, fighting through overflowing parking lots, all because they supposedly admire the breathtaking beauty of this natural space. Yet their very method of interacting with it is inherently corrosive. The intense desire to capture and broadcast the beauty is the exact mechanism that degrades it.
It is the ultimate tragedy of the commons, but, accelerated by the smartphone.
Yeah.
No one sets out on a Sunday morning with the deliberate intention of starving a cow or crushing a rare bee habitat.
Of course not.
What begins as a genuine, if naive, admiration for the natural world sort of curdles into highly disruptive behavior because the feedback loop of social media fundamentally rewards proximity.
That makes a lot of sense. The closer, the better.
Right. The algorithm does not reward a zoomed-in, blurry photo taken from a respectful 30 feet away. It rewards the spectacle of standing shoulder to shoulder with a beast.
As we move into the consequences of demanding that proximity, we have to look at how the animals respond.
Yes, we do.
Because relocating the cows saved the Kent Reserve. But nature is not a passive museum exhibit that just quietly waits to be rescued.
Definitely not.
When human beings push wild animals to the brink of exhaustion for a photograph, the biological equation changes. The animal doesn't just suffer in silence indefinitely. Sometimes they push back.
And they can push back hard.
And the results are terrifying.
Well, the 10-meter rules and the warning signs at a nature reserve, They serve a dual purpose.
What do you mean?
They are heavily designed to protect the fragile ecosystem from us, but they are equally designed to protect our fragile bodies from the ecosystem.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean deeply concerning for public safety.
Yeah.
The sources point out that this specific viral phenomenon is not isolated to Kent. We shift our focus to other parts of England, specifically Hampshire, where the exact same social media trends have targeted other herds of Highland cattle.
Right.
But in Hampshire, the pursuit of these viral moments escalated far beyond stressed animals and trampled moss. It escalated into severe, life-threatening safety incidents.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to remember the physiological state of the animal we discussed earlier.
The fight or flight.
Exactly. You have a semi-wild creature, pumped full of adrenaline, cornered by humans, and starving because it hasn't been able to graze.
It's a powder keg.
It is. Eventually, that fight or flight response is going to tip entirely into fight. The animal will assert its physical boundaries to survive.
The sources actually detail emergency scenarios where fire and rescue teams had to be actively deployed into difficult, remote terrain.
Just to pull people out.
Yeah, to assist individuals who ventured off-path just to get these photos. We have highly trained emergency medical responders driving heavy equipment down dirt tracks, being pulled away from actual structural fires and car accidents.
All to rescue someone who wanted a selfie with a cow.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is one detail in the report that sounds almost comical until you realize the sheer danger of it.
Oh, the tree incident.
The tree incident. An incident where a man literally had to scramble up a tree to escape a protective cow that decided it had just had enough.
It really highlights a profound, almost dangerous disconnect from physical reality. People are so conditioned by the digital filters and like the cute music overlaying these videos on their phone.
The trendy audio tracks.
Right. They look at a massive bovine and completely forget they are staring at a creature equipped with potentially lethal weaponry.
Because those horns aren't just decorative.
No, not at all.
They span several feet across, they are incredibly thick, and they are attached to a neck powered by hundreds of pounds of muscle. They are essentially wearing broadswords on their heads.
Broadswords is a good way to put it.
If that man hadn't found a tree sturdy enough to climb, we wouldn't be talking about a quirky anecdote in this deep dive. We would be analyzing a fatal trampling.
And the experts in the sources urgently warn that this risk grows exponentially if calves are introduced to the equation.
Oh, maternal instinct.
The maternal defense instinct in a semi-wild herbivore is absolute. If a tourist holding a phone steps between a mother and her calf, the cow does not care about your follower count.
Obviously not.
It perceives a lethal threat to its offspring, and it will neutralize that threat with extreme prejudice. It is a completely avoidable tragedy just waiting to happen.
Which really brings us back to the core plea from the authorities managing these lands. The entire crisis, the starving animals, the destroyed habitats, the drained emergency resources, it can all be entirely mitigated by simply experiencing the world differently.
Just taking a step back.
Literally taking a step back, respecting the wildlife, staying on the dirt path, and appreciating the majesty of these creatures from a safe, quiet distance.
The distance is what allows the beauty to exist in the first place.
It is so true. So let's look at the entire chain of events we've mapped out today.
Let's do it.
What begins as a seemingly harmless swipe on your phone screen. Just you, sitting on your couch, double-tapping a video of a shaggy cow in the mist.
So innocent.
Right. It translates into a massive, cascading physical reality.
Yeah.
Your digital desire for that aesthetic translates into overflowing country roads. It translates into profoundly distressed animals who are literally starving from the anxiety of being perceived. The collapse of delicate microhabitats because the ecosystem's living multi-tools had to be fired.
It's all connected.
And finally, emergency responders navigating bogs to rescue tourists trapped in oak trees.
It is the ultimate butterfly effect, really. A digital flutter in one corner of the world causes an ecological hurricane in another.
It really is. So to you listening right now, the next time you are scrolling through your feed and you see a viral wildlife video that takes your breath away, take a moment to consider the hidden biological cost of that 15-second clip.
Absolutely.
The urge to go there is completely natural, but consider resisting it. Or if you do go, embrace the 10-meter rule as an act of profound respect.
Just give them space.
Because the best way to love these wild, beautiful spaces might just be to leave them entirely alone.
Which leaves us with a rather unsettling thought to consider as we wrap up this deep dive.
What's that?
Well, we have seen the data. When a natural location goes viral, the guidelines, the physical fences, the desperate pleas from conservationists, they are all entirely ignored by the masses in the rush for content extraction.
Sad but true.
If the public cannot be trusted to follow basic common sense rules to protect vulnerable ecosystems, what does the actual future of conservation look like?
That's a dark question.
Will wildlife organizations be forced to completely hide the natural wonders of the world? Will they have to employ digital scrubbers to wipe GPS coordinates from the internet and actively fight algorithms just to keep animals safe from our affection?
Wow.
It raises the profound and somewhat tragic possibility that in the modern digital age, true, untouched wilderness might only be able to survive if it remains completely invisible.
Okay, one question for you. How did the sudden viral fame of Highland cows on TikTok contribute to irresponsible visitors' behavior at Hotfield Heathlands Nature Reserve? And what lessons can be learned about protecting wildlife from social media driven tourism? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.